this economy? Zhu Wei, I'll start with you.
All right. Yeah, so I guess I'll take more sort of a positive angle on that. I have to say, I mean, it's not very clear to me what exactly it is, right? So, but the way I think about it is what is not new productive technology. That means property is not. Infrastructure, probably not. EV, new alternative energy, they are likely to be defined, included as an example of a new productive technology. Then what about the other manufacturing? I would say most likely the whole manufacturing sector, most of the manufacturing sector is probably included or encouraged by the Chinese government to support growth. I think the government agenda now is really more about moving the resources away from things like property and to some extent infrastructure, because they understand there's a huge overcapacity there. They are moving things to relatively less overcapacity sort of sectors. I think that's probably the angle.
How? I mean, as Zhu Wei mentioned, we don't really know what it means.
Yeah, nobody knows what it means.
What's your interpretation then?
Well, I think it's a new concept. But the things we borrow into this new concept is more or less the same as what we've been doing for the past couple of years. EV, solar panel, all that kind of stuff, which is, as Zhu Wei said, is away from the traditional property investments. But then, as the actual stuff that we've been doing within this bucket is more or less the same as last couple of years.
So if they're going to be obviously taking up a lot of the growth that was going to be missing with property bubble has burst, obviously.
Yeah.
But at the provincial level, they need land sales. The old model has been getting revenue from property. So how does manufacturing pick up that part of the slack?
Yeah, I guess from the fiscal perspective, it looks like they will have to get a lot of help from the central government, right? So the central government now issue more bonds. I think the debt to GDP ratio for the whole country probably will have to go up. So for the next couple of years, the central government will have to pick up the slack, and then wait for the property sector to gradually stabilize. I don't think the land sale revenue will be nearly as important as in the past. But at the same time, the local government financing is probably going to become the size of it probably become much smaller, and most of that will be transferred to the central government. On the other side, I mean, manufacturing hopefully will absorb some of the labor supply, and to keep the labor market gradually improving. I think that's probably the vision that the central government has, but it will take time.
And how, I mean, I think back in the day when the globalization was a big theme, China could have done this, right, and executed this, where they could just export their way out of their problems. But now you're dealing with these geopolitical tensions in the EU as well as the US as well. So what does this mean for industrial policy overall then?
Yeah, well, let me try this first. Well, during the years of COVID, right, so obviously property starting to peak and then starting to decline. All right, so it's very obvious that if you put more money into property, then the result will be pretty bad. And then at the same time, because of the lost global manufacturing capacity, right? So China has been manufacturing on behalf of the rest of the globe and trying to supply for the global demand. So I think as a result, today we look back, we're seeing all this excess capacity. People has been, criticizing China about, we're having all this excess capacity because part of the capacity is not built for domestic consumption. All right, so now we're left with, this excess capacity. We have to do something with it. So I think, if you look at the domestic economy, right, so manufacturing sector is actually picking up the slack.
Yeah.
In the sense that the value add by the manufacturing sector is actually greater than the traditional sectors combined. So I think, there's gradually, I think internally China is working out a way, but I think globally, it's perceived as an angle that, China is having this huge capacity and, having a global supply glut, and is affecting other countries' benefits.
So again, I was there at the National People's Congress, and I heard from all the different ministry and agency heads, and they kept on talking about new productive forces. And again, to really channel investment into the new three. Those are, of course, solar panels, new energy vehicles, and the like, and batteries, of course, as well. Do we run the risk, if that's the marching orders coming from a top, that there is going to lead to overcapacity, overinvestment in these spaces, and that is going to distort global trade? Basically picking up on the rhetoric coming from Janet Yellen and the like.
Okay, well, I would say that, if you look at the past 18 months, right, the solar panel prices declined 66%, almost 70%, right? So it's the market telling you that there's an excess capacity in place. And also, if you look at EVs, right, so now Chinese EVs cost less than 70,000 yuan to buy one, right? So if you buy a Chanel handbag, it costs 90,000. Right? So it's a thing to behold. So I would say that, the market is already telling you this, excess capacity. And I think one of the solutions really is to export some of that out to other countries. Now, mercantilism has been, one of the strategies that, China has been pursuing over past, I don't know how many years. And I wouldn't be surprised to see, such strategy continue. But then it will create repercussion from foreign countries.
Yeah, but, is that, I do think that will happen. But from a China's perspective, is that something that they just have to give up? I don't think China has a lot of options now. That's the issue. I think, and also if you look across the manufacturing sector, it's not just EV. It's actually a lot of other products. First 3 months of this year, the Chinese exports of sort of the conventional products actually outperformed the new products that you mentioned, the EV exports. And I think on those products like furniture, footwear, suitcases, those exports, I don't see really that big a problem that things are Chinese export cheap footwears to the rest of the world in the environment where a lot of economies suffering from inflation, right? So I think there's a lot of rhetoric on the press, but what's happening, the economic relation is not that confrontation. Actually, there's some benefit that both sides enjoy.
So where do you think we are seeing overcapacity? He mentioned solar. Hal mentioned solar, EVs. Where is it most pronounced, the excess capacity now?
Actually, China, if you look at the past 30, 40 years, that's the one feature of the Chinese economy is that they're always over capacity, right? So cement,
steel,
right.
Everywhere, right?
That's right. University students.
I'm glad we graduated at a time we were not
just in time.
We were not that over capacity. But looking just from the government angle, I don't see that many other options because stimulating consumption is another alternative.
That was what I was just going to say. Stimulate domestic consumption. How is that going to happen? I've talked to a number of economists, including Michael Pettis up at Beida, Peking University. He's saying, look, they need to give cash handouts. It's welfareism, if you will, handouts to the households. Is that, it's not something Xi Jinping wants to do or has a track record of doing it. But what is going to stimulate the consumer and get the domestic consumption to also kind of soak up that excess capacity?
Yeah, I think last year in the economist circle, right, so we're talking about handing out cash to Chinese residents. That didn't happen. Right, but I think another form of fiscal expansion really is, you can use the public money to buy all the excess housing and then distribute it as a sort of a cheap housing, economy housing, to the public. Right, so I think that's one way to solve the housing crisis, and also trying to transfer physically from the public to private. And I think second way to do it is that as we all know, China is facing a demographic challenge.
Yeah.
Right, so in many of the big cities, people stop having kids. Right, so then I think one of the ways could be that you can use the public money to help people raise their kids, right? So give out benefits if they have kids, free education to 18, free milk until you're 21, that kind of stuff. So I think that way then is one of the ways to show that there are caring from the top, and also there's a transfer from public to private.
Real quickly, Hal, anyone that's watching this wants to know how to invest around this theme. How do you do so? If I just bought the Star 50, I probably would have been losing money right now. How do you position around this sort of new productive forces theme, if any?
It's challenging, to be honest. I think the Hong Kong market has been down for 4 years in a row. It's never happened in any asset class in the world. I think right now, especially for this year, things are starting to look up, right? So, for example, manufacturing sector in March is slightly better than expected. The housing sector somehow, it's down 3 years now, is starting to stabilize as well. So I think, in this part of the world, the best opportunity is still in the long treasury bonds, right? So you can see Chinese treasury bonds is still, the yield is still coming down, right? So if the housing crisis is not resolved, you can be sure that, the long yield is continue to trend down, and it's going to make all-time low again and again and again.